The night my twin sister appeared at my door, shaking and bruised, I felt something inside me harden. We had shared everything since childhood, clothes, secrets, birthdays, but I never imagined we would share a war. She was terrified, trapped in a marriage that promised love and delivered terror. She begged for help, and I realized the only way to expose him was from the inside. So we switched places. He thought she had come home defeated. Instead, he welcomed me, the wrong twin, with lies, violence, and arrogance. But he didn't realize he was stepping into his own downfall. My name is Vivienne Clark, I'm 45, and the night my twin sister showed up on my doorstep, bruised and shaking, was the night I stopped believing in coincidence. I had always sensed something was wrong in her marriage, strained smiles, hollow reassurances, but seeing her terrified confirmed what she had been hiding. I wrapped her in a blanket, made tea with trembling hands, and listened as she tried to speak through sobs. The bruises on her jaw were bad. The fear in her eyes was worse. At that moment, I realized that blood may bind us, but love demands action. And action was no longer negotiable. She stumbled inside at 2 a.m., clutching her ribs, whispering apologies as if she were the one who had done something wrong. Her hands shook so violently I had to hold the mug steady for her. She kept glancing over her shoulder, as though expecting him to burst through my door. It was only after locking every bolt and drawing the curtains that she allowed herself to breathe. The silence between us was loud, filled with questions neither of us wanted to form. Her story didn't need words, her bruises told enough. And my anger simmered into something sharper, resolve. When she finally spoke, the truth spilled out in fragments, months of escalating control, manipulation, isolation, and violence. She recounted how he monitored her phone, restricted her money, and punished her for imagined slights. Each detail struck harder than the last. I asked questions carefully. What he did, when it started, who knew? She answered with trembling shame, convinced she should have endured more to keep the peace. That phrase broke me. Peace doesn't bruise ribs or blacken eyes. Peace doesn't silence cries or make someone fear sleep. It became clear she hadn't just been hurt. She had been broken down systematically. And someone had to stop him. The idea came almost impulsively, but once voiced, it felt inevitable. Identical twins had fooled teachers, friends, and strangers since childhood. We could fool him too. She resisted at first, terrified of retaliation, but I explained the necessity to gather evidence, expose him legally, and keep her safe. We rehearsed subtle differences, her mannerisms, tone, routines, until exhaustion blurred fear into determination. We packed a bag with clothes, makeup, and documents. I memorized layout details of their home and his schedule. This wasn't reckless revenge. It was a strategy. She would recover in safety. I would walk into the lion's den wearing her face, but armed with intent. Crossing his threshold felt surreal. The house smelled of polished wood and control, neat, cold, staged perfection. He greeted me with a smile that never reached his eyes, misinterpreting my silence as submission. His gaze lingered too long, searching for signs of defiance. I forced myself to mirror her meekness, lowered chin, soft responses, timid gratitude. Every movement felt like acting in a nightmare. Inside, rage simmered, but I swallowed it for the mission. Each room I entered felt like a crime scene waiting to be documented. I wasn't just infiltrating his home. I was stepping into the core of his power, and I intended to dismantle it. It didn't take long. His temper flared over small things, slightly overcooked vegetables, misplaced keys, or perceived hesitation. His voice shifted from charming to venomous without warning. He paced, monitored schedules, interrogated innocuous decisions. The facade he presented to neighbors vanished behind closed doors. I memorized every trigger, every tactic, how he weaponized silence, how he manipulated guilt, how he expected obedience. I watched without reacting, cataloging his behavior with chilling clarity. It was a masterclass in coercive control, and each observation was ammunition. At night, when he slept, I worked. I photographed bruises she left behind on bedding and clothing. I accessed his computer, discovering hidden folders, financial discrepancies, threatening messages, and photos documenting his control. I recorded verbal assaults, saved screenshots, and copied files to encrypted drives. I found receipts for items he forbade her to buy, tracking patterns of financial abuse. I also noted the locks on internal doors, the cameras he installed, the panic buttons meant for him, not her. By morning, exhaustion weighed heavily, but so did progress. For the first time, he wasn't just a bully. He was a documented criminal. She slipped into the role of the submissive wife with unsettling ease, not because she resembled weakness, but because she had studied it so closely. She lowered her gaze, spoke softly, and responded with practiced hesitation. He mistook it for obedience, preening with satisfaction at what he believed was renewed fear. Inside, she burned with fury, but she used that fire to maintain composure rather than explode. The meekness lured him into comfort, making him less guarded and more arrogant. The shadows in the house whispered memories of pain, but now they served a purpose. Each passive nod was a calculated move, buying time and trust. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. The husband intensified his control to affirm authority. He issued commands disguised as requests and expected compliance without question. He dictated what meals were served, what clothes were worn, and at times, even where eyes were allowed to rest. He policed tone and posture, relishing in the smallest victories. To him, dominance was proof of masculinity. To her, it was proof of insecurity. She noted how easily his ego bruised, how a delayed response or a misinterpreted glance could ignite rage. The more he attempted to remind her of her place, the clearer his patterns became. His domination wasn't strength. It was fragility wrapped in violence. Each night, once he drifted into restless sleep, she texted updates to her twin through coded messages. They discussed his habits, vulnerabilities, and routines, building a psychological blueprint. The real wife coached her on subtle behaviors, the way she arranged silverware, the phrases she used during arguments, even how she folded laundry. These details maintained the illusion. Meanwhile, the twin recovered in safety, gathering legal guidance and emotional support. Two minds worked as one infiltrating, one preparing the escape plan. Their bond became a weapon. Where he had isolated one woman, he faced two united. The manipulation he once wielded now became their tool. She took advantage of his routines, his nightly showers, phone calls, and gym sessions, to plant cameras and voice recorders around the home. Hidden in decorative vases, behind books, and inside smoke detectors, they captured everything: threats, insults, slaps against tables, and demeaning lectures. She also left decoy recordings to test whether he searched for devices. He didn't. His arrogance made him careless. He believed his power was absolute, his control unshakable. He never imagined she could weaponize technology against him. The surveillance turned the house from a prison into a courtroom. The evidence was no longer bruises that could fade. It was irrefutable. While combing through paperwork, she uncovered accounts her sister never knew existed, credit lines maxed under her name, loans she never signed, and transfers suggesting embezzlement from his employer. He had been siphoning money slowly, expecting to repay it before suspicion arose. But greed outpaced caution. She photographed every statement, documented every signature, and secured digital copies. The abuse wasn't just bruises and fear, it was financial theft, identity manipulation, and calculated fraud. His violence extended beyond fists, it infiltrated bank accounts and futures. With every document she uncovered, the case against him grew stronger, transforming personal suffering into criminal prosecution. His instincts, sharpened through years of controlling another human, caught subtle differences. Her silence felt too contained, her fear felt steadier. He questioned her tone, searched her face, and paced more often. The seed of suspicion sprouted when she clasped a glass differently or responded with unfamiliar confidence. He probed for weakness, asking pointed questions about past events. She deflected flawlessly, yet tension rose. The facade held, but the cracks were forming, not in her disguise but in his trust. He didn't know what was wrong. He only sensed the power shift, and narcissists fear loss more than anything else. One evening, after she hesitated for a fraction of a second when responding to him, he snapped. His voice sharpened into accusations, claiming she was ungrateful, deceptive, rebellious. The anger escalated quickly, fists clenching, breath ragged. He slammed a chair, grabbed her wrist with punishing force, demanding submission. But what he couldn't see was the camera angled perfectly behind him, recording every second. This wasn't just a moment of cruelty, it was the moment that validated everything. He crossed a line he couldn't retreat from. While he saw fear in her eyes, what he didn't understand was that fear had transformed. It was no longer paralyzing, it was evidence. The following morning, while he believed she was out shopping, she met with a domestic abuse attorney who specialized in high-conflict divorces. She presented the evidence collected so far, photos, recordings, financial documents, and watched the attorney's expression harden with every detail. He explained legal protections, emergency restraining orders, and strategies to ensure her sister would not be coerced back. Most importantly, he advised patience, to build a case so airtight that not even his manipulation or charisma could fracture it. For the first time since switching places, she felt a glimmer of control, not just over the plan, but over the narrative he had stolen from her sister for years. She reached out to a women's shelter under the attorney's guidance, securing a safe place where her sister could recover without fear of being found. The shelter's staff offered counseling, legal resources, and emotional support, not just for victims, but for survivors plotting safe exits. They listened without judgment and validated every fear and bruise. She arranged the transfer discreetly, ensuring that no trace of her sister's presence led back to the house. The realization hit her. She wasn't just exposing him, she was rebuilding her sister's autonomy brick by brick. Support replaced isolation. Strategy replaced panic, and healing finally had a location. Working with a forensic accountant recommended by the shelter, she mapped out every transaction, asset, and hidden account tied to his name. They uncovered offshore transfers, falsified tax documents, and a savings account opened under her sister's identity. Each discovery strengthened both the criminal and civil cases. His wealth, once flaunted as a symbol of power, now became evidence of fraud. She recorded access logs to prove he had controlled finances exclusively. What he believed to be clever secrecy became his undoing. The financial abuse mirrored the physical, control, deception, exploitation. But now it was documented. And soon it would be exposed. The breakthrough occurred when she staged a conversation designed to provoke his arrogance. She mentioned divorce, hinted at leaving, and questioned his control. Predictably, he erupted, boasting about everything he had done, from physical intimidation to financial manipulation. His words spilled out like a resume of cruelty: how he kept her in line, how he managed the money, how he could ruin her anytime. She feigned fear while the recorder captured every sentence. He didn't realize he was confessing. He thought he was asserting dominance. Voice dripping with pride became the rope he tied for himself. It was the moment their case became indisputable. The next morning, a knock echoed through the house. When he opened the door, he was met not with a neighbor or delivery, but a process server holding a thick envelope. The confusion on his face shifted into disbelief as he scanned the documents. His ego shattered at the sight of restraining orders, asset freezes, and formal accusations. He turned toward his wife, expecting tears or pleas. Instead, he met cold resolve. At that moment, he realized the game had changed. He was no longer in control. The paper in his hand wasn't just ink, it was justice approaching like a storm. Enraged and desperate to reassert dominance, he grabbed her arm and shoved her against the wall, forgetting where they stood. Two neighbors, drawn by the shouting, witnessed the assault firsthand. Their horrified expressions froze the scene. No longer could he claim misunderstanding or exaggeration. The bruises forming were fresh and undeniable. She didn't fight back, she didn't need to. This time she had witnesses. His mask slipped completely, revealing the violent core beneath his polished exterior. The neighbors called emergency services, their voices shaking with anger. He had always relied on privacy to shield his brutality. Now, privacy is gone. When officers arrived, the situation unraveled quickly. She handed over recordings, photos, and printed evidence while the witnesses described what they saw. He attempted charm, then denial, then rage, but his shifting tactics only confirmed guilt. The officers placed him in handcuffs, informing him of his rights as disbelief flickered into panic. Neighbors watched from porches and windows as the man who once commanded fear was escorted away powerlessly. She stood still, breathing deeply, her pulse finally slowing. The arrest wasn't the end, but it was the first undeniable step toward justice. The facade had collapsed. The truth now had authority behind it. In the courtroom, the judge and jury were presented with evidence so extensive it felt overwhelming. Photos of bruises, medical reports, audio recordings of threats, and surveillance footage of outbursts painted a picture of calculated cruelty rather than isolated incidents. The defense attempted to argue stress and misunderstandings, but the prosecutor countered with timestamps and witness statements. The confession recordings silenced any remaining doubt. Each exhibit showed not only violence but intention, control, humiliation, and exploitation. For the first time, the truth wasn't whispered behind closed doors. It was spoken aloud, transcribed, and entered into public record. His facade of respectability cracked under the weight of undeniable proof. The financial portion of the trial revealed an entirely different crime: embezzlement. The forensic accountant detailed transfers from his company accounts to hidden personal ones, forged signatures on loan documents, and unauthorized withdrawals tied to his wife's identity. Charts, spreadsheets, and expert testimony demonstrated a clear pattern of theft and fraud. Colleagues testified about suspicious behavior: late nights at the office, sudden luxury purchases, and unexplained bonuses. The judge saw the bigger picture. His abuse didn't end at home. It infected his workplace, too. What he once boasted as business success was actually a trail of deceit. Now, that deception was unraveling publicly. His employer, initially shocked, quickly realized the severity of the situation. After reviewing evidence, the company terminated him immediately and issued a statement distancing themselves from his actions. Years of networking and reputation collapsed overnight. News articles cited him not as a successful employee, but as a disgraced criminal facing charges. Former coworkers expressed disbelief and disappointment, recalling subtle warning signs they dismissed. The job that once fed his ego and funded his control was stripped away. Without a career, he lost leverage: financial, social, and psychological. The empire he built on intimidation and lies crumbled faster than he ever imagined. The judge granted a restraining order swiftly after reviewing the evidence: physical abuse, psychological manipulation, and financial fraud. It prohibited him from contacting her directly or indirectly, approaching her home, workplace, or family, and accessing shared accounts. Violating it would result in immediate imprisonment. For the first time, she felt legally shielded. The paper didn't erase trauma, but it erected a barrier that he could no longer cross without consequence. She no longer had to rely on fear or secrecy. The law stood between them now. The restraining order wasn't just protection, it was liberation from years of silent terror. Local news coverage amplified the story, casting him not as a misunderstood husband, but as an abuser and fraud. Social media buzzed with outrage, and those who once admired his wealth and charm distanced themselves. Invitations vanished, friendships dissolved, business partners withdrew support. His name became synonymous with disgrace. He had relied heavily on public perception to maintain status and control. Now, that perception condemned him. His polished image, designer suits, staged family photos, charity galas became symbols of hypocrisy. The community didn't just judge him for his crimes, they judged him for deceiving them for so long. Reputation, once his greatest shield, turned into a weapon against him. While the case progressed, the real wife entered therapy through the Shelters program. Sessions focused on rebuilding self-worth, processing trauma, and untangling years of manipulation. She learned that abuse wasn't her fault, that endurance didn't equal weakness, and leaving didn't equal failure. Each week, she reclaimed pieces of herself: confidence in her voice, trust in her instincts, and belief in her future. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was healing. The therapist guided her through boundaries, independence, and recognizing red flags. Healing wasn't instant, but it was happening. Her bruises faded, her nightmares eased. And for the first time in years, she felt safe in her own skin. As the truth spread, the silence that once protected him evaporated. Neighbors apologized for not noticing earlier. Coworkers donated to the shelter. Local women's groups organized support drives. Her story encouraged others to speak up, share their experiences, and seek help. What began as isolation transformed into solidarity. She no longer navigated the aftermath alone, she walked with a community that believed her. The narrative shifted from victimhood to empowerment. She wasn't hidden or whispered about, she was supported. And that support built a foundation stronger than fear. The weight she carried alone was now shared, and that changed everything. Because once the courtroom doors closed, the real punishment didn't end, it began. Like I'm asking you to subscribe, you know there's one more blow coming. The courtroom echoed with the judge's final decision. The divorce was granted with full asset seizure in favor of the wife. Years of earnings, savings, and property he once guarded as proof of superiority were stripped away. The house, vehicles, investments, everything he used to maintain power, shifted into her possession. His attorney protested, citing unfairness, but the evidence spoke louder. Abuse did not entitle him to equity. The ruling symbolized more than financial loss, it symbolized authority reclaimed. For the first time, she held not just legal freedom but tangible independence. His wealth, once a weapon, became her shield for rebuilding. During the custody hearing, the judge reviewed psychological evaluations, witness testimonies, and past incidents of violence. It took less than an hour to determine he posed a significant threat. Custody was awarded solely to the wife, with visitation denied indefinitely. No supervised visits, no shared weekends, no opportunity to manipulate through children. He reacted with disbelief, convinced his charm could sway opinion, but the court saw through him. The children remained unaware of the storm around them, spared from emotional tug-of-war. The ruling ensured their safety, providing stability and preventing future cycles of control. For their mother, it was victory, not for herself alone, but for their future. With the divorce and custody settled, the criminal trial moved forward. Prosecutors presented physical abuse evidence alongside documentation of financial crimes. Witnesses testified, neighbors recounting the assault, experts detailing fraudulent bank transfers. The jury needed little time to deliberate. Guilty on multiple counts: assault, coercive control, identity fraud, and embezzlement. The sentencing hearing scheduled prison time, fines, and restitution. He stared blankly as each charge was listed, the enormity sinking in too late. What he once viewed as dominance was now legally defined as crime. His belief that he was untouchable shattered under the weight of justice. Following conviction, regulatory boards reviewed his case. With felony charges and ethical violations confirmed, his professional licenses were revoked permanently. The career he built, boasting success, networking at high-end events, reveling in public admiration, disintegrated. Emails circulated announcing his removal. Colleagues severed ties, clients withdrew support, and institutions issued statements condemning his misconduct. Without credentials, he could no longer return to his former field or leverage his job for influence. The power he wielded over others, economic, social, psychological, crumbled. He wasn't just unemployed, he was discredited. Reputation, once an armor, became ashes. Stripped of assets, fired from employment, and buried under fines and restitution orders, he faced the inevitable bankruptcy. The court approved filings, liquidating remaining possessions to satisfy debts. Luxury items were auctioned, accounts frozen, and credit lines closed. The man who once flaunted wealth now filled out forms with trembling hands in a bleak office. Bankruptcy symbolized his fall, not just financially, but personally. The life he curated for admiration was gone, revealing the emptiness underneath. Meanwhile, his ex-wife secured stability for her children. His downfall was not revenge, it was consequence, delivered lawfully and comprehensively. With legal battles behind them, the twins finally exhaled. They moved into a safe neighborhood, furnished a modest home with items chosen for comfort rather than control, and re-established daily routines without tiptoeing around tempers. They attended therapy sessions together, learning to untangle trauma and rediscover confidence. Their bond deepened, not forged by pain but strengthened through survival. They volunteered at women's centers, sharing knowledge discreetly, helping others escape similar shadows. Life didn't return to the past, it evolved. They reclaimed autonomy, trust, and laughter. Healing wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Fear no longer dictated choices, freedom did. In the end, closure didn't arrive in dramatic confrontation or mutual understanding. It arrived quietly through acceptance. They acknowledged the scars without letting them define the future. Forgiveness was neither owed nor necessary. Instead, they embraced emotional freedom, boundaries, independence, and self-worth. They stopped explaining, apologizing, or internalizing blame. His downfall did not bring joy, but it brought justice. And justice opened space for peace. On a calm evening, sitting on their porch with tea in hand, they realized the fight was over. Not because he changed, but because they no longer needed him to. They were free.